Okay, welcome to the October meeting of Parsec. Parsec is a 501c3 nonprofit organization promoting science fiction, fantasy, and horror in literature, media, and music for over 30 years. Our mission is to promote awareness of the richness of speculative fiction as literature, art, and music, further general education in the sciences and arts, support contributions both scientific and artistic to society, and to espouse the enjoyment of speculative fiction as literature, art, and music with others. Our program. In October, our guest is Bret Nelson, an Emmy Award-winning creator. When he's not writing stories, he directs TV shows and makes games. Over the years, he's worked with Kermit the Frog, Buzz Lightyear, and Conan the Cimmerian. I'm going to give Bret a bigger intro in a minute, but first we're going to do a few bits of regular Parsec news. Okay, all links mentioned in the following announcements will be copied into the chat on Zoom. Watch for them after we complete the announcements. Jane, you can look for those links.
Yes,
in the
yes, I have to panic to look for those now because I forgot.
That's okay. I have them here too. If I'll get them in once the conversation starts if you can't find them. Parsec meetings are always free to attend and open to the public. Support us by becoming a member. Dues are only $30 a year. Add $10 for each associate voting membership in the same household. Sign up at the link we will provide in the chat. Don't know if your membership is current? Check out this view-only membership list at the link we will provide in the chat. Okay. Announcement. Monroeville Public Library is starting a science fiction book club. The first meeting will be on November 13th at 7 p.m. The SFFBC will be reading Dune by Frank Herbert. They have an amazing list of books put together. Stop in at the front desk to get a copy of the book and register. That's the Monroeville Public Library with a new science fiction book club. And there will be a link in the chat. Okay. We'll see if we have any standing committee news. Anybody want to talk about triangulation or Parsec Inc? No?
It's not my committee.
Cool. Just, yeah. I'm just seeing if anybody back there had any information.
Confluence is the one that I'm involved.
There you go. Would you like to say something about the confluence coming up?
We can say something about the
Why don't
confluence
you
coming
come
up.
here?
With regards to the confluence coming up, we actually have a guest of honor. We have invited, and he has responded, Richard Kadrey, a writer of dark fiction and horror, among other things, dark fantasy, I'm sorry, and horror, among other things, is going to be our guest of honor this year. And he was suggested by the person who is our featured artist this year, Christine Hudson, who is doing our doing the T-shirt and program cover design. Said, well, you know that he lives in Pittsburgh, and we said, okay, and we invited him. He said, absolutely. So we're going to have our first horror guest of honor for Confluence in 2024.
And do you have the dates? Michael was asking before for the dates.
The dates, July 26th, 27th, 28th.
And who's the guest of honor? I couldn't quite hear you, Kevin.
Larry Ivkovich.
All right.
Richard Kadrey.
Oh, okay.
Richard
Thanks.
Kadrey. Kadrey.
Cool.
Okay. But you'll be there and you'll still be a guest of honor, Larry, as far as in my heart.
Guest of dishonor.
Okay, I should have looked to see if like John Thompson was in the
No, he's not here.
No, he's not here. So we don't have any triangulation news for today.
I do know that with regards to triangulation,
I have news. I always think because you have news.
if I didn't put Sigma together, I wouldn't have all of this news readily at mind. It's only a week old in my brain. Triangulation theme this year is hospitium, Hospitium. Basically, it boils down to a mutual hospitality, the hospitality that ensues on the part of the host and on the part of the guest. There are certain things that are required for guests to honor the hospitality that the hosts are offering. There's more in the Sigma about what kind, just some writing prompts or ideas for stories. And they will be open for submissions. I want to say beginning of December, but I'm not positive. and that will be running through to sometime in the spring.
All right. In October, our guest is Bret Nelson. Bret is an Emmy award-winning creator. When he's not writing stories, he directs TV shows and makes games. Over the years, he's worked with Kermit the Frog, Buzz Lightyear, and Conan the Cimmerian. He worked on Farscape, the Peacekeeper Wars in 2004. Bret authored the novelization of the 2011 cult movie Manborg, where a soldier brought back to life as a cyborg fights alongside a band of adventurers against demon hordes in a dystopian future. In June, Bret's story Thread appeared in Dreamforge magazine, and that tale can be read free online at our reading portal, and we'll put the link for that in the chat as well before the end of the meeting. Bret has been published in the Encyclopocalypse of Legends.
Rolls right out, doesn't it?
Which is a collection of macabre myths and lurid legends. And a work Bret wishes more readers knew about is Gabba Gabba Hey, an anthology of fiction inspired by the music of the Ramones. And right now he's working on things he can't talk about. That's what the contracts say. So Bret, welcome to our Parsec meeting.
Howdy.
And one of the reasons that I was excited to have you come talk to us is because I love the essentially the breadth of your career in the many things that you've worked about. And one of the things that I like to get across to people is when they think of writing as a career, they often think, well, I'm going to be a novelist, or I want to write for magazines or whatever. And it's my experience that there is just so much excitement, so many things you can do, and breadth and things you can get your hands in, that is a lot more fun than just saying, hey, I'm going to be a novelist. So I'd like to hear about your experience from that level. And Jane just wants to hear about anybody who's ever been anywhere near Kermit the Frog. So
I have been very close to him and the hired hand that is working him. I guess as far as the different stuff, it's been a 40-year path of just not saying no, if that makes sense. I mean, like everybody in the 80s, I was doing stand-up in Hollywood on the Sunset Strip because it was anybody who could get together half a joke could get a gig, and nobody was getting paid then, which made it weird. The big clubs, the Comedy Store, the Improv, they didn't pay any of their performers in the 80s, because what you got out of it was a demo tape, which was an actual tape because VHS was the thing then, but it had the Comedy Store logo next to your head. And with that tape, you could get paid gigs anywhere else in the country. So that was the sort of co-op that you did. And it was while I was doing that I realized I despised touring. But the jokes came easy, so I started writing for other comics. So the writing took over, if that kind of makes sense. And people would say to me, well, don't you want to perform it? Don't you want to defend the material? And I said no, which was odd to them, that I was happy enough just having written it and getting on with the day. But that gig got me a gig at an ad agency, because a number of comics were moving into copywriting because it was steady pay to begin with. And so again, the writing moved me from cabaret to writing for others to writing ad copy. From there, a group of artists that I work with as a group were hired by the Walt Disney Company. They were illustrators. So print was actually drawn back then. We're talking in the 80s, late 80s. And a group of our illustrators was pulled into the Disney Interactive group because they could draw characters on model. And for those who worked back in the day, games were drawn. They were hand drawn then to create sprites and to create animation cycles and those kind of things. So I was working with people like Mike Dietz. I was working with people like David Jaffe. I was working with our composer for our games. At least 3 that I worked on at Disney and 1 that I worked on at Henson's was Michael Giacchino. So they had quite a group that they put together there.
He's gone on to have a little bit of a career.
Yeah, he did okay. The kid did all right. But after a time, they were looking for producers. at Disney. And the artists that used to work with me at the agency knew that I played a lot of games. And I was a senior copywriter, which at an ad agency, the senior copywriter is really a production thing. You not only write the ads, but you supervise the creative over radio and over TV, and you're managing a lot of people and a lot of heads. And this group of artists, bless them forever, said, if you're looking for producers, there's this guy who used to boss us around and he was pretty good at it. So they got me an interview. And that interview over the course of 2 years got me making video games for the Walt Disney Company. But it took 2 years to get in. It mainly took 2 years to get in because that was right when Katzenberg split off to form DreamWorks. And there was a lot of HR shenanigans going on at that time. But from making games at Disney, and it's all writing, all of game production is writing. There's very few people outside who write dialogues or level designs or anything like that inside of games. It usually falls to the producers. So from games at Disney, after 6 years, the Walt Disney Company and I came to an agreement whereby they didn't want to see me anymore and I didn't want to work for them anymore. So we parted ways. Right about that time, somebody I used to work with at Disney called me and said, I'm at the Jim Henson Company now. This is 90s now, mid 90s. And he said, there is no web presence at all for Sesame Street, Bear in the Big Blue House, The Muppets, or Fraggle Rock. There is none. And I checked and there was a little text page for each with like 3 pictures. And he said, I need somebody who can write miles of content quickly. What's it going to take to get out of your Disney contract, which had been canceled 2 weeks before? And I said, I'll get back to you. So I called him back the next week and I said, you can get me for the low price of X, which he did. And I've been working on and on with Henson's ever since, 25 years now.
Oh, wow.
And that's everything from video games to TV to websites to all of it. And as they started moving more into digital animation, which they were drug into, it happened. I can't tell you exactly when it happened, but it was around when Pixar couldn't make a miss. Puppets and 2D animation kind of fell out of kid TV in the early 2000s. Everything was CG, everything. And if you wanted to compete, you kind of had to play in that space. And the 2D animation all went to prime time, to adults, and the puppets went away entirely. So with Henson's, we developed a method to use I don't know how, but you seem a fairly techie group, so I'll just talk it through. For animatronics at Henson's, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, dinosaurs, those kinds of things, you've got a suit performer in a very usually heavy foam suit. Offstage, you have a puppeteer with a Stick and Waldo rig that's driving the facial animation via animatronics, and usually the voice at the same time. So you have 2 performers working in concert to deliver a character. We took that concept and pushed it into CG. So we had a motion capture performer inside of a digital character and the same Stick and Waldo rig driving the face. Put it all inside of a game engine, drove virtual cameras through it. So we could shoot our CG animated shows the same way we shot 3-camera proscenium puppet television, with the same talent base and with the same methods, which is why shows like Word Party, Splash and Bubbles, and Sid the Science Kid look a little different than the other CG. It's because we're performing them and creating them the same way we did dinosaurs, and essentially the same way we did Fraggle Rock.
You using the Unreal Engine or one of the Unity? What kind of engine?
Proprietary. It's all proprietary.
Proprietary engine. Ah,
Yeah.
nice.
At that time, nobody was doing anything like that. This was 2005, 2006 when we
I'd be real early in that, yeah.
Yeah, so for the graphics portion of it, we were pretty much using OpenGL and creating our own version of the game engine. But the key was to bring the environment in. To control the cameras, we started with Wavebird controllers, game controllers, to control the cameras. But anybody that I handed those to couldn't frame a 2-shot. They didn't know what that meant. So we designed an input device that looked like a PED control. And we hired studio camera operators to move our digital cameras around with this big, heavy device because that's what they were doing. And we hired a TD to run a live switch. a proper DP and a floor manager, and we were doing full 11-minute episodes in a day, because we were, instead of going, CG usually goes shot, 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 we were going scene to scene to scene. And that developed an image and a camera angle and everything that you needed to deliver to editorial so you could cut the show together. Then once the show's cut together, that's the only stuff that goes through the proper cleanup and render phase. That's the expensive, crazy part of any digital animation. So by having an image that you can make decisions on day one, we cut all these iterations out of the backside. And that's where we ended up making savings. And the core of that system is still being used today. Just last year, we did another season of Word Party over on Netflix. They bought 7 seasons now, which is unheard of in preschool television. It's usually 4. It's only 4 seasons on preschool television because they don't need new episodes. They get a new audience. When the person's out of preschool, there's a brand new fresh crop of preschoolers that are ready to step up and start watching the show and driving their older siblings crazy with that old annoying crap that they used to watch. Pandemic hit, productions shut down, and I went back to prose, which I hadn't written in a very long time. And because I hadn't written in a very long time, it was a floodgate. Like the stories just kept coming and coming, coming. I started, 2019, 2020, I think I started really kicking back into the prose again. And since then, I guess it's through luck or, law of averages, I've had 9 pieces published, a couple of them novel length. I've got 5 more coming out between now and March, and there's 7 more in the marketplace. So that's where we're at today. So there's the long-winded thread that got me through all those things, but it was really just writing along. The ad agency said, "Can you write for us?" I said, "Yes." The artists over at Disney said, "Can you come over here?" I said, "Yes." The guy who hired me there said, "Do you want to come to Henson's?" I said, "Yes." They said, "You're in video games, that's digital. Do you think you can apply those to TV development?" I said, "Yes." They moved me out of production and into the director's chair. I said, "Yes." The universe said, "We're going to shut down production everywhere. You think you can write?" And I said, "Yes, universe, I think I can." And then Scott said, "Do you want to come and do this thing on the 21st? And I said, "Yes." So here I am.
That's actually kind of life as improv, yes, and the next thing.
Yeah.
That's not distinct from Jane and I's career as we got into computer games, because Jane came in as a line artist and I came in as basically a writer. And what happens is, as soon as you can do something and do it successfully, especially in a startup companies, and when back in the 90s all gaming companies were basically starting, it's they find that they need and they ask you, just like you experienced. It's like, okay, you've written this dialogue, do you think you could direct the actors? Okay, you did a good job directing the actors. That means you should be an associate producer. Do you want to do that? Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to be a project manager? Yes.
I was lucky to get in when I did, because it was right when cartridges were moving into discs. You had more memory space to use. It was really branching out. PlayStation 1 was just there. Sega was just there. All these different ways were popping up everywhere. And oddly enough, the PC was the one that was the weakest as far as what it could carry. Which is flipped now completely. The consoles are the ones that are looked down on as the lower quality games, and the PC is the one for the real people. But yeah, because of that, there were no set roles, because people hadn't done full cinematics for games before. It was new. People, Soft Image was just coming up as your graphics program, and you had to go find people that knew how to use it, and they weren't cheap, and the software wasn't cheap, and the servers weren't cheap. So if you could find anybody in-house already that you were paying that could sidle over into that role, you did it, because to go out in the marketplace and find it was crazy expensive.
Well, and when we were trying to do that out here too, like in California, there's pools of talent that you can pull from, where you can take somebody who was an actual director and get them to direct something, like you could make some transitions there. In out here, like we were in Greensburg, Jeanette, east of Pittsburgh. We weren't even in town. We were pulling kids out of school. Well, and we were hiring.
We were doing that at Disney too.
Yeah, we were
a lot of
hiring
kids went straight from CalArts in.
Yeah, we were hiring a lot of 20-year-old kids that had a year or two of school to bring them in and do stuff. And I mean, the amount of talent that we had was just amazing, because a lot of those guys are still in games now. And one of them I saw was director on Mortal Kombat, the one that they had just done. And he kind of came to us. He came to us from the art school, but he had some film background, and he just naturally became the director of our cinematics. It was just obvious he knew what he was doing. We were hiring industrial arts people that learned product design in 3D in order to get them.
How many CAD people did you? We had a bunch of people that were doing CAD programming for rocket cones, but just because they knew how to run the software, they became level builders, because
exactly
the software is the software. And what do you want to do? Make a rocket cone or a castle? And they said, castle, please.
Yep. There was a lot of that kind of, and that's still, I mean, you still see that with people. We interviewed a lot of software developers in the past, and it was always, what do you really want to do? We want to make games. They always want to make games. And it's a tough industry, but there's a lot of talent out there doing it.
Well, I'm still I'm sorry, who's that?
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just
okay.
want, after you make your comment, I want to touch on the idea. It all sounds very glamorous and fun and exciting, but Jane and I's experience was also, like 80-hour weeks and disastrous deadlines and horror stories and stuff. So touch on that experience.
That's the fun part.
How was that for you?
Well, it was the point I was I'm still there. I try to make sure that I have something coming out every month. So next month, the thing is Nick Brawl 2 is coming for everybody, and a gentleman named David Bergantino and I wrote the character dialogue for that. So we're still at it. There's a group out there called Cold Room Entertainment that does a lot of game dialogue. They do, because the producers on products will put it in there and they'll realize it's a little clunky. So they either call for a punch up or they call to write it all start to finish. And once you do it right, they call you back again and again. So Dave did Cold Room Entertainment, did Nick Brawl 1. They also did the racing game, and then they expanded for Nick Brawl 2. It's a Super Smash Brothers, but with all the Nicktoon characters from the 90s. So they needed people to, in character, write taunts and dialogue in a campaign mode where you could have Aang from Last Airbender next to Patrick from SpongeBob, and it makes sense. And they're still on character, and they're still aware of their own universes and the situation that they're in. So that part was fun. But the deadlines and all of it are still crazy, because like a lot of things, when you're making a video game, you're designing the plane while it's flying, because there is no
how we
time.
described it. Yeah,
there is absolutely no time to get the game engine built before you get the art done. You have to do everything in parallel. So the airplane's already up in the air and flying, and the deadline's there, and the ads are out, and you know when it's going to be in the store, and you're hoping you get the landing gear finished by the time you get to Chicago, and you got to put the thing down. And everything's a pitch. You're always pitching upstairs and down as a producer, because you'll hit a point where 2 levels just aren't going to make it. They're not going to make the deadline, and you got to pull them out of the game. There's no choice. So that's not the pitch to the upstairs people asking for things. That's the pitch downstairs, where you tell people, hey, that thing you've been working on for the last 18 months, it's not going to be in the game. And you all got paid, but when the game comes out, none of your work's going to be in it. And there's going to be this giant hole in your resume. And when people go to Moby Games to see what you worked on, and they say, what was it? You have to say it's not in there, but I have it on my reel. And that's just the hard reality of the business. So yeah, it's not all exciting. And even then, when you are working on a good part, you're working on one level of the game for 6 months, and that's you only get to work on that bit. It's very isolating.
And it was the best creative experience I think I ever had, working with a lot of talented people. But how demoralizing it was when that got cut, that project got cut, that game, that level, whatever got cut. It was very demoralizing, especially to a young crowd of inexperienced people. It was very demoralizing.
Well, and it's the realities of the hole in your resume. You were counting on, it's been a year, you know, and you haven't been expanding your book. You haven't been expanding your reel because it's been a year. And then at the end of that year to find out that, yes, you got paid, but it's not going to be in there. So you have to rely on reputation to get the next gig. It's hard. It's really hard.
Just like an actor in a movie.
Yeah. Yep. My scene got cut.
There was 3 days shooting and all of it ended up on the cutting room floor.
Yep.
Let's open it up a little bit for questions. Who would like to ask Bret a question, either in our Zoom audience or here at the library?
Bret, I wanted to ask you, do you have a game in mind that you've been always wanting to build and deploy?
Oh yeah, for sure. I pitched it at Disney, I've pitched it at Henson's, I've pitched it privately, everywhere I go. It's the visual Mad Lib, and I can't get it off the ground. It's a Daffy movie studio, and you don't know how it's going to be, but they say it's a series of pull downs, and you say who's going to be the star. It's going to be the kitten. What's this? Pick a sound effect, and you pick a sound effect, and this and that, and the other thing, the music, and then it starts up the actual little QuickTime movie that it put together. Or I'm revealing my age there. The Flash movie, no, it's not Flash now either. The little Unity movie, no, it's not that. Whatever it is now, it puts together a little movie with all the little pull downs that you did, and you find out it's a spy flick, and you've put a kitten into the lead role of the spy movie, and you've got a duck quack sound or something ruder for the sound that the gun makes. And once you know all of that, you can go back through and go to the pull downs again and play crazy casting director and play crazy sound effects guy and do it all again. And you can play it as a group, Jackbox style, or you can do it by yourself. But that's it. The pitch is it's a visual movie Mad Lib instead of just the words. And I can't get anybody to make it.
See, that sounds like a lot of fun, and that sounds like a fun phone, tablet type game, a
Yeah.
good mobile type thing.
But nobody wants to make it.
Huh.
I'll keep trying.
Larry, I see your hand up.
Larry's like, it's already out there. Somebody made it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Larry.
Bret, could you explain what part you worked on the Farscape series?
Sure. Farscape was, well, again, it was an all hands thing. Nobody talk about deadlines and broken hearts and all that. That show had it all. So we had people on 3 continents through the course of it, trying to make this, movie quality onto TV thing. And I'll tell you who the unsung hero in Farscape is, a guy named Sean Redlitz, who nobody knows who Sean is. And Sean ran web for Sci-Fi Channel. And I will go to my grave saying that Farscape is the show that created it sort of in-game chat. If there was a Discord server for Farscape, it would have been blown out every weekend. So he was the one that had like the guest chats lined up every single week, made sure that all the servers were running so the fans could talk to each other during the show. He was really pushing that social media aspect of the program when it was brand new and nobody else did. And every time there was a new episode, we would crash the Sci-Fi servers and people would shake their fists and say, how could that happen? And he and I would both say, it's the best news ever. We had so many people on that the internet itself couldn't handle it. And every time they'd add more space, it'd fall apart. So I was running web for Henson's at the time. And so it was all the Farscape, dealing mostly with Sci-Fi Channel because they were the host of it, but we had to give them support with all of our behind the scenes stuff and things like that. Then we got canceled, which was terrible because Farscape was expensive, crazy expensive. It was a 3-way split between Hallmark, Henson's, and Sci-Fi. And once they saw how to do it, Sci-Fi said, hey, let's try Stargate SG-1. Let's try Dead Zone. Hey, these shows, we can make them with a 1-way split. We can make them just us and keep all the money. So why are we going to do season 5 of Farscape? We're not. And they just bowed out of the contract, cut it because they were only getting a third. So a couple of years later, decided to finish the story with Peacekeeper Wars, which was a 2-part miniseries. And I was working at the Creature Shop then on, I can't remember what the movie was, but we wanted to hold the crew, and Brian Henson wanted to get the West Coast Creature Shop involved in the production because they were losing their minds in Australia and London trying to get everything together for the movie, because a lot of the stuff had been put away and everybody had found other jobs. And all of a sudden, when the show was on the air, you had a steady group delivering to production on a weekly schedule, which was bananas, but at least everybody was there and everything was put together. When the movie got the green light, there was nothing. You had to go get everything out of storage and find everybody again and hire new people and get all the design. You've got to draw it before you can build it, before you can. And so anyway, part of the script, and when it was in development, was that there were going to be a whole mess of Hynerians. They were going to really go back to this civil war with Rigel. And the only time we had ever seen a Hynerian that was not Rigel was, I hope, Orn, am I pronouncing her correct? There was a female Hynerian in the show in season, I think it was, the show was called Fractures, if I'm remembering right. It's decades, sorry. So the first part of it was working with the group to decide, what do they look like? Because the only other, for those who haven't seen the show, there were these little squat creatures called Hynerians, and one of them had been banished. He was a ruler. His name was Rigel, and he was a terrific character. He was sort of a Brian Blessed kind of cursing, oversexed little toad, and he was a delight. And I didn't hear.
Who farted helium?
Yes, among other things. Yes. You knew he let go because the cast would start talking like this, and then right all of them, and they did come back down again. So the first question was, if we're going to do a bunch of Hynerians, what do they look like? Are they, are they as varied as birds? Are they as varied as humans? Are they as varied as dogs? Are they as varied as sort of beagle dogs? Is it just that group? Are they the sporting group of dogs, or are they the breadth of dogs where you could have crested terriers and Saint Bernards? How, with this particular species, how far do we go? Because the only other one we had seen looked just like Rigel because budget, not because design. It's like, we're going to make this one, but it's a girl, so give it pretty eyes. There. Okay, done. Get on. Meeting over.
I can imagine the conversations that happen about this stuff, because I'm sure there were people passionate both directions on these things.
You can be at this time during the blue sky times. We had some good creative people, and they're drawing pictures of, some of them are crazy looking and some are good, but they're quick. It's all quick. And then the final script comes in, and we've only got one other Hynerian, who is the guy who deposed him, whose name was Bashan. And so that was easy enough. We sort of made him more dour. He'd been drug around, and we made him much fatter and older and meaner. And we ended up, and in the end, he only ended being he was a holographic message coming from the home world. So again, I don't know if you're familiar with the show, but the pilot communicator and those kinds of things, they're very banded images. So they didn't, we could realize them completely digitally. We didn't have to build a puppet for him. So in the end, after the creative expands and contracts, that's where we ended up, was shooting that one segment that was about, I think, a minute and a half. With the communication from back home with Rigel. But I include the credit everywhere because I love the show.
It was a great show.
It was, and it's still a great show. A lot of it holds up. I think it's on, where is it now? I think it's on Amazon right now. I think it's on Amazon Prime right now, but it bounces all over the place.
Next question.
I have a quick question. Was there any trepidation on your part when Disney bought out Henson?
They didn't buy out Henson's. They the track was, the Henson Company was sold outright to a German children's television conglomerate called EMTV and Merchandising. And they weren't very good people, as it turned out. And they started selling off pieces of the company. Like they drew a circle around Sesame Street and sold that to Children's Television Workshop. And they drew a circle around some other bit and sold it to somebody else. And then they spent way too much money and bought Formula One Racing, which was really on brand for a company that wanted to become the Nickelodeon of Europe. And it was a lot of trouble. And the Henson family ended up buying what was left of the company back. This was after a 2-year track. What they bought back was not what it left with. And in the time that it had left, the Henson company itself had contracted. Well, when it came back, I think where they ended up was with the classic Muppet Properties, which is the Kermit, Piggy, Fozzie group. That dog was too big for their yard. And Jim Henson had wanted to sell the Muppet Properties and everything else to Disney, right up. That deal fell apart when he passed away. Disney had always been in there. So the deal was that Disney purchased the classic Muppet franchise, Bear in the Big Blue House, which they were already part owners of. And that was it. So that's what they bought. Jim Henson Company still has their original programming. They still have the Dark Crystal. They still have Labyrinth. They still have Fraggle Rock. And they just did a new Dark Crystal series on Netflix a couple of years ago that was fantastic and everybody should watch. And Fraggle Rock has new episodes on Apple TV. They've done 2 seasons now of Fraggle Rock Back to the Rock, with a lot of the original cast even, and those are really good. So there's still a lot of Hensons left. It's the classic Muppet group, the Kermit, Piggy, Fozzie group that went over to Disney, which is why you see like the Electric Mayhem just got their own show. So they're carving out little pieces of them. And yeah, I was trepidatious about it, having been at Disney as long as I was. And as it turned out, they were having the same problems as everybody else does with that group of characters. There's I don't know, I should probably not talk out of school, but there's some trepidation on the production sides where with any nostalgia property, as they call it, they're fearful that the audience isn't going to know who these characters are. So you're going to spend half your time explaining what this character group is, and then the rest of the time telling the story, as opposed to just making an assumption that, how long with Spider-Man did it take before they made a Spider-Man movie that did not feature Peter Parker getting bit by a radioactive spider? How many Batman movies did they make before they finally skipped Bruce's parents getting taken out in the alleyway, where they finally got the confidence to say, okay, people know who Batman is, we can just make the movie. People know who Spider-Man is, we can just make the movie. That level of confidence, I don't think has hit with the Muppets yet. I don't think it's hit where they and they may be right. I mean, I don't have that many interactions with teens these days, thank God.
As I say, most of the people I know who love the Muppets are not. They are in that nostalgia group. I don't know, like, if kids know anything about them or not.
But the thing that made them work, the thing that made the Muppets work, was the assumptions when they arrived. The fact that Kermit could walk onto the Tonight Show with confidence and not care, and just sit down in the chair and start being interviewed the same way they'd interview Tom Cruise or anybody else. That this glamorous pig could take a deep breath on the Today Show and just sing a song horribly. And it was the assumption of success, because the Muppets just always had the highest of dreams and the least of abilities and budgets. And if you go forward with that, the formula is what you should have trust in, not the recognition, because it was the formula that made it all work. And at the end of the day, I think they want to see, Piggy do a karate fight and Gonzo get shot out of a cannon and Fozzie fail desperately on stage and Kermit try to hold it all together. And if you're doing that, if you're true to that formula, the show should work. But I haven't seen the trust.
That's fantastic. That's a great description of it. A new way of thinking of it too, because
the closest they got though was that Muppet Haunted Mansion thing that they did a couple of years ago. It's probably still up on Disney Plus. And Kirk Thatcher was behind that, who was with the Muppets going all the way back. And that was his script that he had been trying to get off the ground for 20 years. For 20 years, he's been saying, when are we going to do, the Muppet Ghosts Gone Wild movie? Because it works for every comedy franchise.
I will definitely be checking that one out then.
Yeah,
I also looked, and it is Peacock that currently has Farscape. They have
There you
all the seasons and the ending movie. So
it moved again.
yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it's hard to keep track of where those things end up because that stuff seems to move around a lot.
It does move around a lot. Buy packaged media. That's my
Yeah.
Buy DVDs and Blu-rays, then you don't have to chase them around.
Well, one of the things, Bret, in your list that we talked about was that anthology of fiction inspired by the music of the Ramones.
Yes.
And you want more people to know about it, so we're more people. Tell us about it.
Let me put my stack. It looks like an EP. How cool is that?
Yeah.
So this is from Fahrenheit Press out in England. And Chris McVie, the publisher over there, was at a dinner with a couple of other people that were book people. And the conversation came up around the pints of what was the first concert you ever went to. And it turned out that all of them were at the same show, which was the Ramones show in London. It was the first time they came over, and it was a legendary show. If you look this up, it was the punk movement in England was still kind of this underground, angry sort of, you're doing shows in public restrooms and then cupboards, and it's just a bunch of people fighting. You could barely hear the band, and it was glorious. But it wasn't what you'd call legit. And when the Ramones came over and played, they were demonstrating that this music can actually cross the pond, and it can be more than just the anger. It can go outside of this club. It can spread. You can spread this healthy anarchy around. And at that show, the story was everybody was there, and Joe Strummer had to sneak John Lydon through a restroom window because he didn't have a ticket. So they had to bust out the window into John to get, the lead singer of the Sex Pistols in to watch this Ramones show. And they started talking about what an influence the Ramones were on their lives. And they put out a call, and they said, come up with a title. The Ramones have 13 studio albums. Pick a song. Write a story. It doesn't have to be about the song, but if you know the song and you read the story, you should be able to go, okay, I can kind of see the connection between those things. They'll pick the best 24. They'll put a playlist on Spotify, and that'll be the double album backed up by the fiction book. And they got something like 300 submissions, and they picked 24. I have the longest title, which is My Brain is Hanging Upside Down, Bonzo Goes to Bitburg, and which is a great song. But all the stories in it are great. And it's a passionate little piece about a band that I feel strongly about. So that's why I push for that one.
Did you see the Ramones in concert?
I didn't. I saw them. They weren't, believe it or not, they were opening for Agent Orange when I saw them. So it was in Pomona. It's sketchy. A lot of those older files were lost in the fire of '87. There was a big a lot of damage moved through that brain in the late '80s. So I didn't have clear memories the day after, and I have even hazier memories now.
Well, just go ahead, Jane.
Before we started recording, we were talking about the Escape from DeVille Manor. I found my box. It's
there it is.
It's sitting still in my office. I have all the games that we worked on over there. Yeah, my story that I remember from that was, we had a kid that was working for us. It was 21 years old that knew a program called Animator Pro, is what we were using at the time for the 2D animation. And we had to take him because he couldn't go to California because he was too young to rent a car. So me and a programmer that was working on it and Dave, we took out to California so that he could teach Disney animators how to use Animator Pro.
Nice.
Yeah. And both Dave and Mike, both the programmer and the artist, are still in games today.
Well, Peter Weiss, the producer, runs third-party development for Xbox now.
Wow, cool.
So, yeah. Yeah, speaking of which, back in those days, excuse me, I remember when we were doing the Tarzan video game, there was a device called the Imagine Easel. I don't know if you've ever seen this thing, but this is how Disney works. Glenn Keane was the key animator for everything then, but he couldn't draw with a Wacom tablet to save his life because he couldn't look at a screen and move a stylus and see what he was doing. So to fix this, they built this tall contraption, huge contraption. And there was a monitor up high, aimed downwards, piece of glass. Under the piece of glass was a large Wacom tablet. The monitor projected the output of the Wacom tablet onto the piece of glass so that Glenn could take the stylus, put it under the piece of glass, and as he drew on the Wacom tablet, the line followed the stylus. And this thing was the size of a tool shed. And it wasn't very portable, but in doing that, he could get the basics of the mostly the tweening, because the man could do it. We had a frame budget in those days, which sounds crazy to people now, but you would have X amount of frames of animation that you could use, which included the cycles. So if you had a walk cycle for somebody that was 6 frames long and you could figure out how to do it in 4 frames and still have it look good, that was, you know, frames that you could poach for other things. So where Keane was brilliant was we would have our guys draw something and it would be a 12-frame run cycle. And he would flip through their stuff and say, actually, these 3 frames are redundant. You don't need those. And he would draw this impossible squiggle that just meant nothing and pull the 3 frames out and put the impossible squiggle in between the 2 keys, and it just flowed.
Yeah.
Because he had the brain that could say, your mind will see this image, this shape, and this image, and your mind will just stitch them together into a single thing.
And that budget was so tight because of the lack of memory on most machines at that point in time.
Well, you had what was on
any of those characters. Yeah, you could only have so many.
You had what was on the disc.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't download an update once you loaded it into the machine.
Yeah, I don't have anything that lists credits on this one at all, but see, I have the little book that came inside there.
Oh, back when games had books.
Yeah. I have the little ads that came in the box, including one for the Lion King.
Right.
Yeah, whole thing is here. Yeah. I have a return postage to Disney Interactive here, so I got it all.
I gotta look. Oh, wait. As he showed me his Frankenstein thing. Magic Artist Studio.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I've got this one. And it's, the little book is inside the CD. So
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, noes.
Map and hint inside. Yep. Yeah, that's cool stuff.
There.
Yeah, this was a nightmare project for me, because it was one of the first ones where I was really like being the associate producer on that one, and the expectations from Disney well exceeded the existing game engine. Really? Yeah. We want puppy vision so that the puppies can, and this was one of the funniest programming stories I ever told, because it's the 3 guys from Disney, it would have been Peter and 2 other guys there. And they came to our office and they were working with the programmer, and the game was getting pretty far along at that point in time. And the one guy, I can't remember his name now, but he was like, we want puppy visions. We want to have those puppies. Like, he was talking about a first person angle from a third person isometric kind of game. He wanted a first person puppy view. And it's like, yeah, that can't happen. But we need the puppies to have artificial intelligence. We need them to be able to walk around these rooms. The rooms are 2D. You know, rooms. This was 1995. Everything was still 2D pretty much at that point in time. And, you know, we want them, you know, they can't bump into the tables. They can't do this. They can't do that. And my programmer's like, this is going to take months and months and months. And I'm like, Mike, he wants a path so that the puppy doesn't hit the table leg. Oh, well, I can do that in 5 minutes. It's just, It's just that idea when you talk to a programmer and then what reality is. It's just. But my position was between reality and the Disney producers, and it was not
That's a tough seat.
an enjoyable project. Yeah,
That's a tough seat.
Yeah, and
and it was
that,
out.
by the way,
It was pretty off brand for the kind of things that we were doing. We were doing D&D and role playing game kinds of things. So the Disney stuff was just pretty outside of our experience as well. And it was right when the big companies were getting involved.
I just wanted to pop in and say that has always been one of Jane's greatest strengths as a producer or a manager of any kind. She has the ability to stand between two people from two different worlds, listen to them, and turn from one to the other and say, "This is what he just said in your language," you know.
Or you're both saying the same thing.
Yes, sometimes they were both saying the same thing, but this one was trying to describe it in fourth dimensional math, and this one was trying to talk about it in how cool it would look when they did this or because I was between programming and art pretty much all my life. I've been between programming and art people, and I still do a lot of that kind of translation for people now.
Well, just speaking about writing, and before it gets out of my mind, I want to compliment Bret on his story thread that he provided to Dreamforge, and I want to specifically talk about why. Not only is it extremely well written, but you're doing the one thing that I'm not seeing in hundreds and hundreds of submissions that we get, because all of us we're just coming out of a submission period, and we got like 700 submissions, and everybody wants to write about the end of the world and or have their protagonist face the big evil, and overcome the evil that is destroying the world or whatever. You wrote in thread a very personal story about an individual. I won't give away the plot, but basically about an individual with a personal problem that they are trying to overcome. And you made the reader empathetic with them in their position. And then you not only, said, okay, well, this character is going to have to overcome their issue. You gave them community support. You basically said, and, all they have to do is turn around, and there essentially is, family. There are the people who are the community. They're ready to support you if you're ready to make the change and get past your personal problem. And that basically is what I want to see in Dreamforge. That's, what I'm looking for in these stories, and in any guise that people can give to me is basically that idea. It's the world is not going to, yes, there are problems, but the world's not going to end tomorrow, but we do need to work together as a community to support one another through the trials of life. And that's what you did so beautifully in that story.
Oh, thanks.
It's a beautiful story. Yeah. And we've had a lot of good comments on it as well.
Oh, that's good too. Well, it is. I mean, in any successful, I'm trying to think of a good movie that would nail it. Tough, because they're all very dark these days. But yeah, the interesting character to me has always been the one that frets. It's the Piglet character that I've always sympathized with, the one that runs through the dialogue of every possible permutation of the future and finds themselves, the inaction is the only action that they can take, and it's usually the most tragic. And at least in my life, when I suck that up and just go ahead and take the next step, even if the disastrous scenario happens, it's usually okay, because at least you've moved through it, instead of just having this massive black cloud it's still in front of you until you move through it. I mean, even if you decide not to go through it, it's still there, and there's good stuff on the other side. So yeah, I've written a couple of them like that, where it's about pushing through.
Cool. What do you see for you pushing through? Like, where are you going from here? Where do you want to go from here?
The stories keep coming, so that's good. I've got another novelization coming up. That one's not announced yet, so I can't talk about it. That'll be out next year. I've got a children's book that's not really for children. It is kind of, but it's in the same vein of sort of the edgier Roald Dahl or Graveyard Book kinds of things. So I wouldn't read them to toddlers, but the material's still pretty good. That's coming next year. Oh, okay. Here's a good one. Here, we'll do a cover reveal. Let's do that.
Well, that's exciting.
I wonder if I can do a sharesy screensy. Here, hang on. Let me see if I can do this. Let me see if I can do this.
There you go.
Is that there?
Yeah.
All right. So there's two of these. There's Bog Fiends, and the other one is Murder Garden. So the fun part for me about Bog Fiends and Murder Garden, they're two novellas. And I had a chat with the folks at Encyclopocalypse, and they're printing these the same way they did the Ace Double books.
Yeah.
If the older people in the room will remember those.
Yes, the older people in the older people in the room remember that. Clap, clap,
Yes.
clap.
I think we all remember that.
Yeah, so they're printing the two novellas back to back and upside down so that you flip the book over. And the other good thing that Encyclopocalypse does, like this is my copy of Manborg, but they do everything in this mass market trade size. So it's not only going to be the flippy double book, but it's going to be mass market trade when it comes out. So the real puzzle they have now that they didn't used to have is where does the UPC code go?
Ah.
Because we've invented a book that doesn't have a back cover. So that's the puzzle they're currently trying to solve. Now in their own bookstore version, if you buy it direct from the publisher, it's not going to matter because they don't have to put all that crap on the back. But if it goes out of house, they've got to deal with it. So these are very 70s pulpy story. Bog Fiends is a rubber monster, attacks a city story, and Murder Garden is a cops and thugs in northern England suburb trying to hide bodies, and there's a mad scientist controlling people's brains and that kind of stuff. So they're both sort of 1970s pulpy stuff. We invented a fictitious film studio that put out these B-grade flicks. So we had a framework by which we could tell a bunch of stories and put them in a certain period and have a certain voice to them. And we went so far as to write like IMDb fake trivia for the movies and the songs. And we've got a couple like storyboard frames, but none of it ever existed. But the point is building a framework to say, we don't need to apologize for some 1968 sort of things going on in the books because we're treating them as a historical record, as a find, because the studio would buy pulp novels to make the movies into, or they'd have the movies serialized in zines of the day, and that's what we're claiming that the stories are. So this is the first two, but as I'll tell you this, as soon as they announced that they're calling them double tap editions, these double books, as soon as they said they were doing it, a bunch of authors in the stable are like, "Oh my God, I got so many novellas and nobody wants to buy them." Like 3 different people said, "I've got so many novellas and nobody wants to buy them." So they've already got a bunch of titles for the series just because people had them in the trunk.
Ready to go. Yeah,
Ready to
nice.
go.
Yeah, well, let us know when those come out. We'll do some promo.
January. Those will be out.
Yeah,
That'll be
January.
out in January.
January.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll be looking for that.
That sounds like fun.
One subject I'd like to ask a little bit about that's not specifically related to your career, but you're involved in so many things, and I've been collecting opinions on the rise of AI as far as like ChatGPT and writers and whatever side you fall on or whatever your opinion might be, it's just going to be interesting to hear it to add to my collection. So
my opinion is clear. I have seen the file footage of children playing in snow, making snow angels and throwing puffs at each other. And where they're at is they followed their parents to work, and it's the blowout from an asbestos factory. They used to let kids play around in this fluffy, malleable stuff because it was fun. And as you watch them rolling around and having fun in it, you know that none of them is going to make it past 40. And the same with the people that are working there. My feeling on AI is, as with tobacco and asbestos, by the time we realize how dangerous it actually is, it will be in every building and everybody will be hooked and it will be too late. That's where I'm at.
Wow, that was a wonderful introduction on that. That's a very good image to bring to that.
But that's what I see when I see kids, making movie star voices or even just going on Midjourney and doing artwork. You're teaching it, you're making it stronger, you're playing with a big pile of asbestos. And we don't know how dangerous it is right now. Right now, it's a big, fluffy, fun thing that we can toss at each other. And in my heart of hearts, I think the big, fluffy thing is gonna turn out really badly. Okay. And it's not that, Skynet's gonna become, send robots to kill us all. It doesn't need to, because there's an incendiary device in all of our pockets. They don't need to send a robot to kill all of us. But it's when you can't trust anything. It's when you can't look at a thing and know that it is what it proposes to be, when you have to scrutinize everything and not trust anything that you're given at face value. I think that's when everything collapses. That's the collapse.
And we're kind of there now, though, because you can't trust the video. You can't even trust a live Zoom call at this point in time. I'm
not here right now.
See that? But it is possible to do that. And it's been a long time since I've trusted any still image that you see, because, that was long before AI that happened. You can't trust anything that you see visually.
I may sound darker and more heavy-handed than I need to be, but that's, when I really peel it back to the core of it and say, why are you nervous about this? That's why I'm nervous about this. Or maybe that's my piglet. I don't know.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. What other questions might we have?
What are you looking to do? What are you anticipating the next thing is going to be for you?
Well, what is the next thing I'm doing? I am.
Well, let me rephrase that. What is the next thing you would like to be able to do?
There is a method of television production that I'm trying to figure out how to do. And the contract that I get, when I say can't talk about it because that's what the contracts say, I just signed another contract with Henson's that is 36 pages long, and the part of that contract that has to do with my actual work and compensation is 2 pages. That's how crazy the NDAs have got these days, and it's common language for the NDAs to say throughout the universe and for all time. And it's because there was a case about 10 years ago where somebody claimed that because the movie went into space and bounced off a satellite and came back to Earth, it lost all of its copyright when it did so, because it left the planet. And what he was grabbing came from outer space. So how could the company, the Earthbound company, claim ownership of it? And the case was heard. It was dismissed, but it was heard and had to be defended. So that changed the copyright language to throughout the universe and for all time. Anyway, there's a production method that I'm trying to figure out with the help of the Henson Company that combines a bunch of stuff right now that requires a lot of really technical people to get in the way of the spontaneity, and really shows have come a long way as far as what you can get in camera right now. If you watch behind the scenes on like The Mandalorian, with those giant, background screens and everything that they're doing, there's more happening in lens and in the moment now than ever before. But behind the scenes, the army of people that it's taking to drive that, and it's happening so quickly that they just keep bolting more stuff on. I mean, you look at any one of these cameras and there are Nernies and Nordic Nulnars and wires and antennas, and it's this crazy hedgehog of stuff attached to the camera just so they can keep track of everything they need to keep track of now. So I'm looking right now in a way to just stop. Let's hit the brakes. How much of these things are the same thing? How much of these things can we actually turn into a thing to where we don't need 75 people doing math to tell the joke, or to cause the excitement? Because that was Jim Henson's whole thing, was how do we get it to a person? And so I'm trying to I want to take that into modern digital fantasy film and TV production, because we've hit that point again where there's something needs to be done.
You want to try to bring some of the spontaneity of the performance into it,
Yeah.
as opposed to as much technical.
Can I tell a quick?
You know.
Do you have time for a quick story?
Mhm.
I'll tell you a quick one.
We'll talk to you all day. Just keep going.
Well, a million years ago, Ed Sullivan showed that those days, if you had a puppet on television, they were inside of a puppet theater. There'd be a little, proscenium puppet theater with the puppet inside, and the host would stand next to the puppet theater and talk to the puppets. That's how Kukla, Fran, and Ollie worked. It's how Topo Gigio worked. It's how they all worked. Jim's revolution was he looked at the TV and said, well, that's a puppet theater. Look at that. It's a little square thing, just like that. So how do I get that to be the puppet theater? And what he came up with was this methodology of then as now the sets are on 4-foot risers, the cameras are on 4-foot risers, puppeteers stand down in the well, put the puppet up over your head, and now if you frame here, it's right. But hang on. Do I have ice? Yes. So the key is that he found was the camera itself. So there's a vocabulary of movement to the camera and in the camera that the audience knows what this vocabulary means. So if the puppet's looking to the lens, it's talking to you. If it's looking to the right or left of the lens, it's talking to somebody else. If it's looking below the lens, it's a little sad or it's a little thoughtful. And if it's looking above the lens, again, it's thinking, but it's not as sad. So just using those little points of reference, you could see what was going on in the thought. It wasn't just a thing telling jokes anymore. It had thoughts and feelings. It became a character. And then if you have two of them, they can have a conflict, and then you can tell a story. And that was the breakthrough of the Muppets. As the puppets got more complicated, Rolf has fingers that move. Well, that's a second puppeteer, because your right hand is over here. You need a literal right hand to be that other live hand. So if you see like Cookie Monster with his two hands, that's two different people. Every now and then you get one like the Swedish Chef, that's one person being both hands because it's too complicated to coordinate. But that's now you've got two people under there. By the time you got to Dark Crystal, it was 7. By the time you got to Little Shop of Horrors, Audrey 2, the giant plant, was 52 puppeteers working in concert. And that was because Frank Oz, the director, said, this thing's a giant mouth. And if we don't have the phonemes right, if it's not going ooh and e and f, if those shapes aren't there, it's just going to look stupid. Because the whole creature was a giant mouth talking and singing. And if it was just doing this, it would be silly. So all along those lips, because it was all cable control, you had guys on the stage floor, and it was 5 across the top lip, 5 across the bottom lip. 2 people controlling this, 1 on the tongue, others on the other shapes. You had all those little ones. And by the time you get all that going, it's a marching band. They practice and practice. The soundtrack's running at half speed. So all the music on Little Shop was playing at half speed so everybody could keep up. And if you changed anything, you had to start all over again. So again, crazy, crazy complicated. The revolution that brought that back down was using computers to control servos to push and pull on the cabling. That was the first big one, Henson Performance System. It started on Storyteller, which is a show that everybody should watch. Anthony Minghella wrote the scripts. Jim produced the show. It was all based on myths and legends. I think it's on Amazon right now. But it was John Hurt as the storyteller, and he would tell the story to a little dog, and it's all beautiful. The second season, it was all Greek myths, and they got Michael Gambon to be in the storyteller role. But the dog for storyteller was Brian Henson, and it was a little dog face, and he had a joystick on his hip. And with the joystick, using the computer controls, on the compass points, he just had the emotions. So if he pulled up, the dog got happy. It brought the ears up and it brought the smile up. He pulled it down, the dog got sad, pulled the ears down and this down. And just by riding that little joystick and relying on the servos to do those emotions around there, and then flapping the jaw along, you had a single performer talking to a single character in a camera, and it all just worked. It all worked beautifully. And it's not a matter of eliminating jobs. It's a matter of creating the spontaneity. Does that make sense? Because one or two performers, it's there. It really helps build the character. And again, in digital production now and in TV production, we're getting away from that. It's too many hands. It's too many hands on deck just to get anything done. And so that's what I'm looking to do that would be the next thing, is to take that giant army of expense and time that I think is getting in the way of the fun, and getting it back down to how close can we get to a camera and some actors and a really good script and do it. That's my long-winded explanation.
That's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
That it's like, I can understand when you're talking like a marching band, you can't have any spontaneity in a marching band. That
Nope.
just doesn't exist.
And if anything changes, you've got to go back to the field and learn it again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've taken out the middle part of the song. We're only doing this part and this part now. Well, we can't just go. We've got to figure out how that transition goes.
And the fewer people you have, the easier you can, even if you need to go back and practice, if you have 2 or 3 people that have to do it, it's a lot different than a marching band.
Yeah.
Well, Bret, you've just described, what it is you're hoping to do and that sort of thing. As far as new talent coming into the field, people coming out of school, people with hopes, is there a place you see that's kind of new where, because they can basically get their foot in the door, and it isn't overcrowded with talent?
Boy, it's, again, I left school to go join the circus pretty much, so I may be the wrong one to ask, but I am always about get on a crew. Just get on a crew, be a PA, coil rope, do whatever you need to do to be on the set, because you will see in this thing all the different aspects there are. There's sound, there's people pulling wire, there's people setting up TV monitors, there's people sewing, there's still people sewing. If you really want to get into visual effects, be a sculptor. Get some clay and learn how to sculpt, and you will be able to get a job at any visual effects company on the planet, because everything starts in clay, and fewer and fewer and fewer people are using it. If you can sculpt rather than ZBrush, yes, you can do it all digitally, but still everybody wants it in clay in the middle of the table so they can spin it around and they can change it. Because if you do it in ZBrush and you 3D print it, you can't change it in the middle of the table. But if it's clay and they say, can the eyebrows be a little more angry? The sculptor can make the eyebrows a little more angry and everybody can look at it again. It's a lot better than doing it on monitors. Unreal is conquering the world right now. I don't know if Unreal will continue conquering the world, but it's certainly killed Unity and Maya and everything that came before it as a real-time view. I have yet to be on a set in the last 2 years to not have 2 Unreal operators on set doing real-time digital lighting and things for matching up the previs to what we're shooting. So anything you can do to learn Unreal just the same way other people would know Microsoft Word or Excel, you can probably find work there.
Some of the stuff I've seen on Unreal has just blown me away. Mostly game stuff. But
the last show we did for Henson's, and we're using Unreal for our real-time view now. The difference being that we're very hopeful that with the real-time digital puppetry, I want to do the show in front of a live audience. I mean, we want to do a complete digitally animated show that's animated in real time that you then put on the air. There is no post-process. You edit it and you put it out. And the stuff's getting strong enough that's becoming a reality. We've got full fur. We had a fully furred monster character dancing and we could adjust the lighting on the fly. All of it.
Yeah, that's such a far cry from the huge render farms that would have to take minutes to do a frame.
And again, it puts the spontaneity back, because if the performer shakes and sees what all that fur does, they can use that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they totally can jump onto that and use it. If they see that it's got a big bouncy belly under the muscle system that like rocks back and forth when they do stuff, they use all of that stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of our guys, when it was probably 90, whenever Unreal first started, one of the guys that worked at Dreamforge then, that was the name of the computer game company, was Dreamforge as well as our magazine. But the one of those guys was real into OpenGL, and he actually worked on some of the original OpenGL for Unreal at the time. And to see what it's doing now, it's just blown me away with
Well,
the quality of it.
they're smart about their open sourceness, you know. And now they're going to start charging more and more license fees now. Unreal just had their big conference at the beginning of the month, and it looks like everything that was completely open source and free is going to be completely open source but not free anymore. So please, public, continue improving our tool set and give us money too.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens now that they're gonna twist the dollar knob and see if it's still the most popular version. But it's remarkable. It's folding well into film and TV. A lot of times the game stuff doesn't quite bolt on.
Well, was Mandalorian using Unreal? Because I thought I read an article. I thought I read an article that said that they were using it, because I don't think I was aware. Like, I was very aware of Unreal as game engine, but I don't think until I thought it was what I read the article about, that they were using that to do stuff real time. Because I know Jon Favreau's real into that, but he's real into games and stuff too. Yeah. But I thought that I had read that he was using Unreal, and I was not aware that movies and TV were really using it in that way. And
their logo's popping up in the credits more and more and more.
Amazing.
Okay, well, Bret, we don't want to take up your whole day, but that was absolutely fabulous. I mean, I am so happy that you were able to join us today, and it was a wonderful conversation.
Listen, it was fun.
Yeah, thank you very much. And just everybody, is there any last question for Bret, and we'll let him go? We're good. Let's do a little clap.
Thank you, Bret. That was great.
And definitely looking forward to, whenever Dreamforge has its next open periods or whatever, send us a story.
You've got one now.
Okay. All right. I have 700 of them, so I haven't seen it yet. But I'm looking forward to reading that.
Okay.
So again, thank you very much. We wish you all the best in the world, and appreciate you being here with us today.
Sure. Bye, Ray.
Bye, Bret. Thank you.
Thank you.